Welcome to the Devil's Rest Book Club, where we dive into the details of Christopher Ruoccio's Sun Eater series. It is I, your plutocrat host Cameron. Along with me, as always, is the High Palatine himself, Archon of our podcast, Drew. Drew, how you doing?
I am doing well. This week we're going to be covering chapters 4 through 6 of the first book in the series, Empire of Silence. You jazzed?
Yo, I'm stoked because
Been-
we're picking up, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
The first time I read through this book, I thought, like, man, this is a slog to get through. But I mean, I think you would agree with this, right? The idea that upon a second read, he is really laying the groundwork in ways that I didn't realize the first time through. I just couldn't wait to get further in the story than what we're about to cover, but now that we go back and go through it, it's really, really interesting. The world building and how he sets up stuff that he brings up later.
totally. And I actually think it's a good thing to have people reading it a second time around, like ensuring people that are reading through it for the first time is like, oh no, like pay attention because like a lot of this stuff is genuinely involved in the remainder of the series. Like there's nothing here that is actually wasted space at all, even if you don't know what it leads to. All this stuff pays off. So like, just trust the author a little bit. It's actually worth it. Like
Yeah,
really
it's
is.
crazy to think about it too with how much he writes that
Totally.
everything has purpose,
Yeah.
nothing is a throwaway. So, and we'll point to that. But where we last left Hadrian, he made this big play. He said,
Yes.
I'm not gonna let my brother take the throne away from me. I'm the older brother, and that's the way we've always done it. And then he makes a fool of himself. But he thinks he probably did all right, right? Stepping into the room with the director, like confusing the whole situation, shows up late, and we're going to see how it plays out. So we begin with chapter 4, The Devil and the Lady.
Yes. And we have Hadrian coming in here to have a conversation with his mother of all characters, which is pretty interesting. We have a lot of impressions early. This is continued from our first section of our book about how family is just very cold. This themes will continue like this as we're reading. This is evident in her discussing really not knowing his dad and all this
Mhm.
stuff in this chapter. There's also some discussion in this chapter about leadership and stuff like this, but it's pretty clear early on that this stunt he's pulled is not paying off, as
Yeah.
indicated by her not your smoothest performance commentary as though the chapter opens.
Keep in mind, yeah, that's something I'm realizing as we go through this is the
Yeah.
first line in the chapters, banger.
The last
Not
page
that
and a
not that
half
the
too.
middle
Yeah.
is not a banger,
Yeah.
and then the last like page and a half is also a banger.
Yeah.
Not your smoothest performance. Like you wonder if you stopped at chapter 3, okay, is this play gonna work? And clearly written out, first thing that you
Nope.
see is, sorry, dude, you
Didn't
done
work. Yeah.
messed up.
He's got these interesting modes as an author where you'll like intro paragraph Ruocchio sometimes, which is like
Hmm.
gigantic exposition craziness. And then you have narrative Ruocchio, which is like the middle portions of his chapter. And then you have like prose god Ruocchio, the last
Yeah.
page and a half where he just like pulls out all the stops and goes philosophical and stuff. That's a theme I'm noticing in a pattern,
Hmm.
just reading through it. So it's interesting to continue to see it.
So this is the first time that we get to meet Liliana
Yeah.
Cephalos Marlowe, his mother. They're getting dressed in her rooms before this like stately dinner with the Longhopper Consortium, as we'll meet in just a minute. It's interesting, like that we're gonna see a contrast, a stark contrast between Alistair, his father, and Liliana, his mother, as we go through the beginning chapters of this book and how it impacts Hadrian and how
Yeah.
they are alike in their treatment of Hadrian and how they are different.
Yeah.
But just a little background on her. He mentions that she's a librettist. I had to look up this word, but apparently that means somebody who like writes operas. And she's also like a filmmaker, so she is this artist type. Whereas
Yeah.
father is down to business, the governor of this like area, this whole continent on this planet or whatever. She is like artsy fartsy woman. And it's interesting too because even in like the like Ruocchio, his classics come out a ton in this chapter, especially at the
Yeah.
beginning when he brings up like these different names, naming have names having different meaning, like Kephalos, which is her maiden name. That's also like his grandmother, Hadrian's grandmother line is like the son of Hermes
Yeah.
and an Athenian hero associated with the dawn, which I thought was interesting too, because like sun and dawn and light becomes this huge theme throughout the book. But also, I didn't know who this meant, and other people will understand this better than I. But being a cisgender white male, I didn't understand who Sappho was. Apparently, Sappho was a Greek poet from the island of Lesbos, and she's like sort of the origin of the term lesbian. So like when he calls
Ah,
her this figure like Sappho in her art and whatever, he's also saying she prefers the company of women, and he explicitly says it later.
yep.
But she's getting ready. They're hanging out. Hadrian's like kind of miffed, you can tell, about after his failed attempt to. I think Hadrian at this point, he seems like he's so smooth, and clearly he is just the opposite, right? I mean,
Yeah. It's brash and brazen and making
yeah.
a mess of things. And even if you kind of like can see where he's coming from with his concern,
Hmm.
he's doing it in like the most bulldozerous way that is just almost certain to make his plight worse. Just though it's typical like teenage-ish kind of behavior where it's like
Yeah.
I get it, but like the way you're behaving is not making the case for you. There's something that is a note here too, which I think is really great, which is Hadrian comparing himself to his mother's desire to be near windows,
Hmm.
desire to be elsewhere, and it's interesting, like as we meet her, that like at least the sense I get initially, like being introduced to Alistair and stuff like that, is that there's this distance between him and Hadrian. He's
Hmm.
like kind of immediately, even though the relationship is so weird with mom, it's like sort of identifying with mom's personality more than dad, right?
Yeah. And we'll see it more clearly as especially as we get to later chapters in this
Yeah,
episode. I think a constant theme throughout the books is Hadrian sort of distancing himself from his father and
yeah,
like wanting to align himself with his mother. But very clearly early on, like even in the beginning of this chapter, before they even go on to the next plot beat, he's like lamenting the fact that she's never around. And so
yeah,
like I think
yeah,
part of what you're talking about is him trying to grasp onto anything that he has in common with his parents for
yeah,
multiple reasons. One, neither of them, even though she's like physically distant, she's never in
yeah,
Devil's Rest. And
yeah,
his father is in Devil's Rest all the time. He's either in Devil's Rest or he's on business with his boss, his mother-in-law, right?
yeah,
So it's really interesting to see the dichotomy between like mom is literally physically continents and a flight away, and father is like right next to me, and both of them are just as distant from one another and
yeah,
from me, right? And you
yeah.
could tell that that definitely hurts him, especially when she says things like, I married him and I can't say I know him when talking about like Alistair. So going back to your earlier point, there,
The distance
yeah,
everywhere. It's very strange, like even our in our modern culture and stuff like that, even people's relationships that like don't work, like there's still a sense that like they kind of know each other, even if it's like just insofar as they like hate each other and stuff like that. Like
yeah,
there's like just this distance everywhere in the family structure here. Like there's just so little involvement of her being late to his even his birth and stuff. It's just like they're so detached is really the feeling
yeah,
that it generates. So it's it's really interesting. This is the theme that I feel like I didn't fully appreciate on a first read of this, and just the impact it has on Adrian. It's just
hmm,
like very important to the start of the novel. It's played out perfectly here, even though kind of like honestly like kind of drawn to mom a little bit more than dad. She's
she's a more likable
Yeah,
figure
she's
for
more
sure.
likable. She doesn't have the presence that Alistair has, but she's more likable for sure. You'd rather like have dinner with mom than dad.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Well, I
sure.
mean, maybe we'll find out in a minute, but
That's true.
so it's interesting. Just one more note before you move on to the next plot beat here. She's like, as they're having this conversation, getting dressed and ready for this state dinner, she's like kind of shocked that Hadrian is so upset at the fact that clearly his father is favoring Crispin to take over the role,
Uh-huh.
even though like every rule in the empire is they'd sort of take the Roman mindset of the successor is chosen by by the leader in advance, whereas his family has sort of had this sort of older patriarchal structure where it's expected that the oldest child will come next in line. And so
Yeah,
he has this, as the oldest child, I sort of feel the same sort of entitlement. So
yeah.
it frustrates me to see it when like this crazy hero that we come to know and appreciate is this 20-year-old shithead kid that is just like, it's my job. Why are you taking my
Right.
job? Even though Like we'll find out later, Crispin is playing his role better than Hadrian is.
Yeah. I think something else at the end of this section that I really appreciated upon a second read that I think is worth noting for readers to just hold in their head is this difference in ruling. She says that ruling and standing beside your people are mutually exclusive, which is this is something that I think will come up later in the book, and like it's just something I think that people should keep in mind is that the values of House Marlowe are there's this distinction between you lead one way, there's this separation between the leaders and the people that are being led. You can't be amongst the people being one of them and be a leader. It just can't happen at the same time. And that theme will come up later as well. And I would just put a pin in that because I think it's important, even as the series progresses and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So from there, they move to the dinner with the Wong Hopper Consortium, and I think the opening line of this, he has a little like chapter. It's not a chapter break, but like a scene break almost. I love this opening line that he says, "Stars, I thought, were born and died before dessert," and it just made me laugh because, like, imagine being a kid and having to go to a business dinner with your family and having to, nothing is fun about that as a child in this case. No. And imagine for these people that live hundreds of years, how many courses and how long these dinners
the liberties they would take with just the endless. Yeah.
It's just so long. And we'll find out later that these people are not quite as long lived as Palatine, but they're sort of like the closest that you could get to being Palatine without actually being born in the vat or whatever. So you got to just imagine that these dinners are like a day or two long, right? This could be going on forever. And Ruocchio never gives us a determination of truly how long the dinner is.
Yeah.
But I just love the way that he starts it.
Yeah. At the start, I just wrote a brief note just for people to keep in mind. Jad and Tavosi are mentioned.
Yeah, they'll come up later.
Nothing too important quite yet. We'll get more exploration out in the future. The thing that caught my eye early in this chapter is the comparison of Hadrian's dad to Caesar and the sort of world building present within a statement about the fact that Alistar is this presence. You feel this presence from him. I don't know how Ruocchio manages to because Alistar's not actually on the page a whole lot quite yet. Mm-hmm. But you still feel like this intensity from him as a character with very few words describing him.
It's like a cartoonish villain, right? Like,
yeah, he feels real to me. Like I can feel his I know people like this. I've met people like this.
Super serious,
intense. They don't have to say anything for you to feel like their aura coming off them. This intensity.
It's like an anime villain.
Exactly. Yes. There's a line in several chapters that will be in the next episode that I will point out emphasizing this. But it's mentioned that he's this big character, but he's one of an entire class of people just like him, which is a really interesting way to both elevate and diminish him at the same time. That does a really interesting thing. It works where you have this world building thing present with oh no, there's a dude like this, on every small little development.
And all of them are competing with each other.
Right. And so you start to think okay, well, what does that entail actually for the structure of this empire? Who is, what is the Caesar of this, of all the Caesar? It's just an interesting way to both elevate, diminish his character and do world building very quickly. And so,
if he's this anime character, sort of gravitas figure, can you imagine what the Emperor's like? That kind of thing. Does it just scale up?
Yeah, that's right.
As you get through the narrative, and we'll find out for sure.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, that the Wong Hopper Consortium is this group that has come in to essentially procure the rights to uranium because their planet Kaishen, which they normally had gotten, they're responsible for terraforming in the Empire a lot of the planets, which is, if you're creating a galactic empire, a super necessary business. And they're the monopoly of doing this almost. If they're not a monopoly, it's like a duopoly or whatever, but only a certain people do this, and they're the major player in this space, and they need uranium to do that, and their uranium is gone because the Cielcin have attacked and destroyed the planet of Kaishen.
Yeah. Which leaves House Marlowe sort of remaining power for uranium. Yeah.
So they listened to the consortium talk for a little bit. Just a note on the term that I used earlier. I didn't know what a plutocrat was, but apparently in the index, again, I remind everybody, there's an index in the back of the book. Go there first before looking it up online. I would go there and then I would look it up online if you're ever confused about a word. I mean, Ruocchio's good about giving you context, but his definitions are like in universe and they're fantastic. So his definition for a plutocrat is any plebeian who's earned enough money to buy expensive genetic augmentation. Essentially, they've like paid their way to get elevated to patrician, and it's somebody who's like gained this power through wealth, essentially. So we'll learn that palatines are up here on the scale, patricians are up here, they've been elevated, and then there's a big gap between patrician and plebeian, just in terms of like lifespan, genetic augmentation. But it sort of gives us an inkling to this really hierarchical, socially
Yeah.
stratified society that we're in. Then from there, in the middle of dinner, 15-year-old Crispin decides to drop the bomb. I imagine this kid just, his intrusive thoughts just immediately exploding out
Yeah.
saying, hey, does Cielcin eat people? Is it true?
Yeah.
And then everybody at the table just like stopping.
This is the 10-year-old finding out that grandfather's a veteran and asking if he's killed anybody. This is like
Yeah.
this thing. It's like,
Yeah.
brother, like this is just completely divorced of social context. But a huge, I love this discussion. A huge discussion ensues about the Cielcin because of this being brought up. And we start to get like more interesting information other than there was this horrible thing that happened. We get to know them a little bit, which
Yeah.
I love. Again, this is something I believe I said early on in previous episodes, which is I love the drip feeding of information in this book, where you're just like, it's like Ruocchio, like I see this, but like please tell me more about the evil pale aliens. And so we get the introductory stuff. We're getting more information about the fact that they do eat people, right? It is true that it's not just a rumor. And there's this comment about like cannibalism. And then we get this interesting moment where Hadrian, narrator, actually jumps in and is like, because Hadrian Craig's like, no, they're not cannibals. They just eat people. If they'd be cannibals if they ate themselves. They don't do that. And Hadrian, narrator, jumps in and says, actually, that was wrong. We just didn't know that they did that. But they actually do eat each other as well.
Which is really funny because, like,
Yeah.
on top of that, he's not only just saying it, like, the scholiasts that are at the table on both sides are like, yeah, he's right. And so
Yep.
clearly the people around the table are recognizing, dang, this 20-year-old kid knows a lot about the Cielcin. And then I think at some point Gibson says, like, he speaks the Cielcin language really, really good. And so he's sort of like flexing his knowledge. And then narrator Hadrian comes back and says, yeah, I was wrong. We just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, we didn't know that.
After saying that, like, this is his area of expertise. Just
Yeah.
the idea of a 19-year-old having any sort of expertise to me was really funny.
It's funny. It does speak to the knowledge level of the Cielcin at the time, which is kind of interesting. Like, how
Yeah.
much do we actually know throughout various points in the story about them?
Mhm.
You know, like we get more and more information as the story continues and stuff. So it's interesting to see that that's going to be something in the story. Is like, what do we actually know about them? What do humans know about them actually?
Yeah.
Because we don't know anything. We know that at this point in the story, we know that they're nomadic and they travel in these gigantic clusters, and it says that they're roughly 10 million strong, which is like really crazy, just like this like migrating horrible horde all over space.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy.
Space Vikings, from what we understand right now, space Vikings that eat people, cannibal space Vikings.
Yeah, like
So
it's like some kind of space orc thing or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild.
that eat humans. It's got to be terrifying to be faced
Yes.
with one of these, I imagine. And we'll find out. I thought it was really interesting, too, that at some point when Hadrian's flexing his muscles in this conversation, Director Fang, who's like the leader of this, doing the business relationship with the Marlows, basically says, hey, you should use those skills and become a part of the chantry. And immediately Hadrian is like, you're telling me to go to be a priest? And he like white knuckles, but is polite.
Right.
Let's keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
He also, in that, she says, like, it's strange for one of the peerage, one of the emperor's own peerage, to take such interest. And this is the first time that we get this sort of, it's a small little not throwaway thing that Ruocchio just throws in there at you. And he will then say it more explicitly later, but what she is saying is, it's really interesting that you, who has a distant connection to the royal line, this I think is the first time that we find out that he
Yeah.
is, I mean, these families are so geographically distant, and even the distance that we see at the immediate atomic family unit is so far, right?
Right.
We can imagine that there's a lot of distance between him and the Emperor. But
Yep.
it's interesting that there's even like this level of Palatine above Palatine where you're like, oh, I'm connected to the royal family.
Right. Yeah, and there's like this like closeness factor too as well. It's like even distance, but still attached to that is really important.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Hierarchy among the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah. She then like there's a conversation about how the war's gonna end and all this different stuff. And ever the businesswoman, she's like, yeah, we're probably gonna have to sell him food when the war is over. And then his mom was like, are you kidding me? Well, I'd like to see them gone. But
Yeah.
then that's when Hadrian goes a little bit too far.
Yeah. He starts talking about the Cielcin, but like in a way in which they have advantage or there's some superior element to them. It's like he's
Yeah.
talking about them not in just like, oh yeah, get rid of them light, but like in, I wouldn't say a positive light, but a socially inappropriate positive light. And he discusses this and gives detail about how, this is a species that migrates and they have these gigantic populations. We're stuck on planets. So, like, we can spread across the stars and stuff, but we live on planets. And so we're sort of stationary. And you can almost imagine, like, if you've got, like, dudes that come to your island with the boat and they just start shooting at you, and you're kind of stuck and they can just sail away over and over again. It's actually very difficult. He says, ultimately, extermination is impossible. Like how are you supposed to exterminate a gigantic population roaming, raiding, not planet-bound species?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so very important point. Actually, really interesting, given that like with the context with the beginning of the book of thinking about like, wait a second, he's saying that it's like almost impossible to get rid of these things that he's saying he ended the war with, which is like
Yeah,
an
right.
interesting contradiction of young Hadrian saying it's not possible and old Hadrian saying it's already happened. So it's an interesting thing. I didn't actually catch this on the first read. It's like, oh, that's actually really interesting to be in chapter 4 of this book where we already established that this has happened and come to pass. So how does Hadrian in the future overcome this supposedly? It's a really interesting
Yeah.
thing.
It's at this point, Ruocchio is setting up these dichotomies to break them later, right? And
Yeah.
we'll see if he ever inserts more of this stuff as we go along further in the tale. As he is saying that basically the idea of killing all of these beings is impossible, even though we know that he's ended the war. His dad tells him, and I think it's the first time that he uses his name in the entire narrative, which is what shocks him because he never hears his name from his dad.
Yeah.
Another like point of distance between the two.
Yeah.
He's like, Hadrian, shut up right now. Hadrian's like, what? What did I do wrong?
Well, it's interesting too, because Alistar has this composure to him, which is like he will. If I get the sense that he would rather contain himself than have an outburst, even to control his son's silly nonsense.
Yeah.
Because to have an outburst is almost lowering himself to address his son in this way, and he's like, he would rather be in control. And so for him to snap out like this, I think sort of speaks to just how out of social line Hadrian has become here. I remember this scene very distinctly from the first time I read it, of being like a really important point of like world building. It's like, oh, like this is a character has an interest that is not socially appropriate. He shouldn't be fascinated by this the way he is. He's pulled himself outside of his culture to be involved in this. And I remember thinking like, what kind of costs are going to be associated with it? What does that mean for the narrative that
Yeah.
his father's reprimanding him for just talking about it?
And we'll find out a little bit in the next chapter on some
Yeah.
of the implications of what he's making. But like his dad no less like accuses him of treasonous thoughts. And I
Yeah.
think he's sort of forced to do that
Yeah.
publicly
Yeah.
because he never knows where, who's listening and who's not.
Yeah.
I just love that this is such a dad move when he says, Hadrian's like, I didn't think. And
No.
Alistair says, no, you didn't. Apologize. It's like, oh.
Ruocchio's got a clever knack for short sentences and dialogue.
Punchy.
Yeah, it's just snappy. He's particularly with Alistair, I think. He just really embodies that character well. And it's just perfect. It always feels very, very good, very satisfying. Even though it's like attacking our characters is always very good. I love it.
After that moment, Hadrian sort of like looks down at his plate of food and shuts up for the rest of dinner, and he's thinking to himself. And I love the line that he actually puts this because we're gonna sort of see the way Alistair sees his children
Yeah.
going forward. The line that Ruocchio puts is, "I was his legacy made flesh." I was an extension of himself, his legacy made flesh, not a person.
Yeah.
So to Alistair, Rocky is clearly indicating he's this Tywin Lannister-esque figure where the family and progress and everything is secondary to the goal of advancement. Whereas he's not a person; it's just a tool for him to use to further the family's
Yeah.
grip on power.
Yeah. And insofar as Hadrian steps out of that, he will pay costs, like
Yeah.
his usefulness only interacts with his ability to interact with legacy
Or
and,
lack
and
thereof, yeah.
right, right. That's exactly right.
And that's pretty much it for chapter 4. We move
Great
on.
chapter.
Great chapter.
Yes, chapter 5, the next day.
Yeah. Tigers and lambs.
Tigers and also knack for fantastic chapter names. Very, very great. We have the start of this chapter with some foreshadowing here, which we got this pattern of events happening to me. Perhaps you see like narrative Hadrian talking to us as the audience. Like maybe you see a narrative coalescing around what's going on right now. And it's sort of, as readers, we're sort of getting, it's like, okay, I get it. Hadrian's messing up, dad angry, Crispin. We're seeing these elements sort of swirling together. And then we start having this conversation between Alistair and Hadrian at this point, if I'm remembering, about the episode that occurred with. Go ahead.
Before that, we actually have like the Wong Hopper and them meeting and talking about like business, like getting down to the actual business. And essentially, it's really interesting that, again, we have to keep our antennas up. The beginning of the chapter and the end of the chapter, got to keep our antennas up for anything important, just like you mentioned there. But now this is the rubber meeting the road for the negotiation. So they had an introduction, which Hadrian walked in on late. First issue, right? If he's a batter, if he is, and Alistair is pitching, strike one is him showing up late to the meeting. Strike two is him bringing up this like treasonous idea in front of business associates at a formal dinner.
Yeah.
So he's on thin ice right now as they go through this. And it's funny because like another thing Ruocchio sneaks in there is he's late to this meeting again, right? Like it's like he just can't show up on time. Now the first time you can sort of like not blame him. Maybe it's sort of a similar situation, but he just is late for this meeting and shuffles in as Alistair is talking with Director Feng about belt miners. She's like trying to, they are clearly like positioning and having an intense negotiation around the terms that they are going to strike now that Alistair knows that he's in a place of power, but she's trying to get any sort of shrewd businesswoman saying that I'm hearing that there's like some unrest with the belt miners. Like, how is that going to impact things? Slowly, like not only showing that she's done her due diligence, but basically saying, I should get a better price because there's a possibility of me not getting my shipments on time or whatever.
Yeah.
It also mentions that the war is adding pressure to essentially it's constraining uranium in more ways, right? Where in a time of peace, potentially they would just be using this for terraforming, but now they have to think about, oh, well, we may need to use this against the Cielcin. And sort of there's a third party that really enters in the scene for the first time. We are introduced for the first time to the Chantry. We've talked about the Chantry, but this is the first time that we actually meet a member of the Holy Terran Chantry in the form of Eusebia and her associate Severn, I think. And she's basically like, we have to imagine the Chantry at this point is sort of this state religion, similar to, we're getting a lot of analogies to Rome, right? So there's this state religion. We'll get a lot more insight into the way that it works, but they're not only the religious entity, but they're also like the Inquisition, which is part of the reason and part of the issue with Hadrian talking about the Cielcin in sort of a positive light or saying that they have advantages. they could be listening at any time. They hold the reins in a lot of areas of society. And she's basically coming out there saying that, hey, we need to designate a certain amount of this uranium you're talking about to defense and to the war, right? We need to send it off, and we need the vicereine to make sure that she has all the nukes that she can in the event that the Pale show up.
Yeah, it's interesting that the war is both limiting the supply of uranium and necessitating it at this point in
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Interestingly enough, I think this book doesn't tend to have the reputation to have political intrigue as much as some of the later novels. And I think a lot of us as readers are guilty of actually just not catching the fact that there actually is like galactic political stuff going on like this. I didn't really appreciate how much it's like, oh no, like the war is affecting the politics, the economy, the resources in a very real way, like, that is impacting the social dynamics, the political dynamics, and really shaping like trade negotiations like this that are occurring.
and the galaxy in a broader way, right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine the scale of this
Yeah.
is impacting, because from what we understood when they talk about the destruction of Kaishen and all this different stuff, like that's the furthest that they've gotten in,
Yeah.
and that's sort of like an alarm bell because before they're just on the very edge of the Norma arm, I think they talk about,
Yeah.
where, which seems very very far away based on the context, but they've made it sort of like to a, if we're thinking about like the inner rim or whatever, they made it to it like a mid-rim planet or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
attack this place that thought it was totally safe and isolated. And it goes to show, back to what you're saying, how much impact the Chantry really has if it's impacting this on such a global scale. They're involved in all these topics. Imagine you going into a business meeting and your pastor is like sitting, or your priest has to like sit
Right.
in
Yeah.
and make sure that it's associated, or your government, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of both.
It's very interwoven. It just sort of demonstrates the factional interweaving of the universe and stuff like that. It's good to see our factions sort of start to pop up and all that, even this early in the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
So from there, again, as they're posturing for this deal, we find out more about Alistair. He also, Feng may be a shrewd businesswoman, but Alistair is one of the
Legit.
best.
Yeah.
It's revealed as part of this chapter that the reason that he got into power was because his father was like murdered, and then he was elevated at like a really, really young age. Okay, so we have Alistair. His dad is the one who's the executor of the system, as his Hadrian's grandmother, Alistair's soon-to-be mother-in-law, is away on forum conversing with the nobility. So the vicereine is away. Alistair's father is in charge and is killed, and then at that point, Alistair is elevated to that post in the vicereign's absence. And at that same time, because of the actions of his father, a rebellion against the vicereign and House Marlowe starts up. And he single-handedly, as he doesn't have any assistance, at least at the higher levels, he's got total control of the army, destroys. I mean, you got to imagine sort of the
Yeah.
Reigns of Castamere-esque, like, crushes this rebellion.
Yep.
And not only does he do that, he clearly like crushes Fang in this negotiation when he says, like, let us not forget who diverted their plans to have this conversation, who was like on ice for more, who's planning on having to be on ice for more years because of the fact that like Kaishen has blown up. I have the power in the situation, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got all the leverage. I think that this moment where we're sort of given this backstory to Alistair is really important to his character, just in terms
Yeah.
of building it. Because this, it's like, oh, this guy's not just a stern conversationalist. Like this guy, like came out of the womb like war ready. Apparently, like he just like
Yeah.
fully like crawl and gets things done. Not just a. It's like, so in terms of like setting morality aside, effective, strong, powerful leader. Yeah, very important to him. It and continues to be important in the universe as we run.
a sort of nihilistic, like a Nietzschean figure when it comes to
Just like
power
realpolitik
dynamics.
guy, just
Yeah,
like full blown, like anything goes, just power and control
that's
kind
all
of
that
guy.
matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
showing that here with his actions, and we'll
Yep.
get some more explicit conversations about it later. So he like drops that bomb, right? Drops the
Yeah.
mic, and the director's sort of like, "All right, fine, yeah, you're right." And then we don't see what happens, but they leave the room, including the chantry leaves the room, and then just another dad moment as Hadrian and Crispin are trying to leave the room. He's like, "You two stay right now.
It's
We're gonna have a
terrible, dude.
conversation." Um, and Alistair sort of starts ripping him a new one, basically saying, "Hey, I gave you a job to go talk to the miners guild. Like this was your responsibility, and you forsook it."
Yeah.
We find out a little bit more about the fact that the Chantry is involved because of the Maricanii uprising.
Second time it's mentioned, I believe. It's been
Yeah,
mentioned earlier and it comes up again. Yeah.
they are the ones who are the gatekeepers for all technology,
Yeah.
even for Palatines, right? We'll find out later that plebeians essentially have no access to any technology except in the form of if they're working for a guild, which so dystopian to me to think about the fact that like these people have like diesel engines and their arms and
Yeah.
the nobles have warp drives and all this different nonsense. Not warp drives, but like spacefaring
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
And it reminds, as a Dune fan, I know, I shouldn't bring it up every time, but it's clearly like to me a nod to the sort of Butlerian jihad of this
Yeah.
universe.
Mm-hmm. It's great though. This is once again like, um, I don't view the Dune references as a negative thing at
Oh,
all.
I don't either. I'm just
Yeah.
saying for me, like it's going to be really hard not to bring it up every episode. I love
Yeah.
it's a nod to it and it's a new interpretation of it that we'll find out more about later that I'm stoked
Sure.
about.
And I think it's frankly, I think that the the Americanii and all this stuff, it's it's fascinating. It's interesting. It's like Ruocchio is like, listen, this Butlerian jihad vague stuff. Let's put it in the sandbox and actually play with it a little bit. And
Yeah.
we get a lot
Yeah.
more stuff going on. It's just like Dune fans like that was cool. Let's do a lot more with it on the page. So it's really good stuff. Let's see. We have some things that we learn about like the dynamics of like managing the sort of guild workers and all this
Hmm.
stuff, if I'm recollecting. Like Alistar sort of gives some background about, we sort of keep these people in this sort of seesaw phase of like giving them small concessions here, yanking them back, sort of just giving them enough to be satisfied and prevent rebellion, but never actually like getting to any sort of true equilibrium, sort of moving back and forth as the population sort of gets older, dies, as passes on, the flame of rebellion dies and grows again.
It's the
Because
most dystopian like
right,
corpo takeover thing that you can imagine because
right,
these people live like 300, 400, 500 years and will outlive four generations or five generations of your family. So they'll like give the union some concessions for like 50 years and then we'll take it away
right,
and then they'll go through that
right,
cycle like you mentioned. It's
yeah.
terrible.
Right. It's just enough to maintain order, not
Hmm.
to get any genuine change in place or anything like that. That's not the aim. Just as we were speaking earlier, this cynical realism that Alistair has is present even in this. And Hadrian interacts with this. He's like, "There's this problem. We can, try to fix it or whatever." And he's like, "Bro, like that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to fix problems. We're trying to keep things under control. That's not what
Yeah.
we're trying to do."
And this is where he clearly like lets Hadrian know where he's screwed up in his conversations with that guild
Yeah.
factionaries. A reminder to the listeners that in our last episode, Hadrian met with the guild, like a guild factionarius, which is like a leader of a guild, who is a plebeian, who's basically like coming up to him and saying, "Hey, I've got like we don't have the equipment to be able to mine this
Yeah.
uranium and people are dying of radiation poisoning and cancer and we really need help." And Hadrian in his sort of idealistic young, it's twofold, right? One of it's an idealism and a young thing, like wanting to actually help and solve a problem. The other is like, I got to get out of this meeting because I know that I have to go and
Right.
make my grand entrance.
Right.
Alistair's letting him know. Even just the little concessions you made were too much. Do you know how much these enrichment crawlers cost? They cost what, 500,000 marks or something like that. It's crazy. 15 million marks, even more. And that's before import costs and the tide to pay the chantry just to be able to use it.
Hmm.
And how many of them have broken down in the last few years? It's 9. So can you imagine the amount of money that it takes to
Yeah.
deal with this? And Hadrian's like, no. And that's where Hadrian sort of realizes I
Yeah.
messed up more than I didn't realize that I had messed up in this situation. And Alistair is letting him know that he is.
I appreciate that this is not black and white as well with because you could have a cartoon Bond villain as Alistair.
Yeah.
Often Alistair has this interesting thing where he's this stern counter to Hadrian's values and what Hadrian wants, but also Ruocchio gives him the benefit of making points that are true through sort of like a value system that we as the audience probably don't appreciate very much. He's like,
Yeah.
listen, like, because he points out the ways in which Hadrian is naive, that are genuine. He may go way too far and be like this cruel, crazy person as well, like keeping these people caught in this horrible dystopian cycle. But he also like points out, is like, listen, dude, like this is not as straightforward as we just buy them. I'm not arbitrarily just keeping things like there's a reason for this stuff. I mean, like this even goes further when there's discussion about the chantry is like, listen, dude, you can't hoard too much technology. Like the implication for like the chantry glasses planets with atomics that have to you can't we can't just
On
start
suspicion, right? Like not
right
even on suspicion, they'll
right
just wipe you out.
it is not a straightforward decision even if we had the money. I don't think it's a good idea to have a bunch of these things because we don't have control over this faction that can annihilate us
Yeah.
if they deem us a risk for Americania uprising. It is a problem for a lot of reasons that are actually true, not just value disagreements.
On a higher level of that too, you and I both read this book initially before we were fathers too, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, obviously, like Alistair is not a father-like figure to emulate by any stretch of the imagination, and
sure.
Hadrian very sure makes it clear. But there are some moments where you're just like, oh, I kind of feel for him in a little way. It's just kind of strange. I didn't realize this on my first read through because one, I wasn't a dad and I wasn't thinking about it, but the other was in some respects, he's trying to, in his own way, teach his child the consequences of his actions.
Yeah,
And I can sort of feel some empathy for that. Granted, he goes way too far most of the time,
yeah,
but it's in his own way. He's trying to groom his child for leadership and also teach him, like dispel his idealism, showing him the real world. He just does it in a way that's really loathable in most cases.
yeah. I was just gonna say it's really hard. Like, how do you get a control of it? Like we have young children. I don't know how you get a hold of someone Hadrian's age when they are just turning away from everything you say. You say, go do this thing. It sort of gives you an opportunity, maybe theoretically, to learn something, to do something right. And he undermines his dad and just gives concessions, tries to rush and ruins this meeting. It's like, it's very difficult to interface with someone behaving this way as a parent, I'm sure. And even though like the values are wrong in my view,
And yeah, from a moral standpoint,
from a
yeah,
moral standpoint, it's still like how there are like real lessons that should be taught here about naivete and stuff like that. It's like how do you actually
yeah.
do that without Hadrian just like making a mess of everything because he's just running over everything, thinks he knows everything. So I can imagine it's quite difficult even if Alistair had better, less cruel values. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting here too that Hadrian then is like, all right, well, how in this situation can I possibly recover? Um, he says, you know what, Gibson and I will go and we'll talk to this guild factionarius and then we will like resolve the issue. And strangely, 15-year-old Crispin, who's been pegged as his rival the entire time, sort of says, I think it's a good idea. He's really good at talking. You should let him do it, Dad.
yeah,
Alistair, oh, both of them are like taken aback by it.
yeah.
Uh,
I love that because it sort of speaks to the difference into Crispin might be as a character compared
Yeah.
to how Hadrian perceives him. I'd encourage readers after they finish this book to consider reading The Lesser Devil to explore Crispin's character more because it's interesting that we always have to be reminded this story is told from the perspective of Hadrian. So we are getting an interpretation of Hadrian or of Crispin from Hadrian's point of view. And that comment from Crispin feels completely disjointed from any interpretation of Crispin that we've had thus far. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't fit with the model of like silly Crispin trying to take the whole thing and he's like this bright. It's like kind of a interesting thing for your younger brother to take your side. It's like that seems like a almost a noble kind of a younger brother kind of thing to say. It doesn't fit the caricature we've gotten thus far of Crispin.
As a brute and as like an
Right.
idiot and like
Right.
an enemy, right? Almost. Even though he's my brother, he's my enemy. And I mean, at this point, all we know about him is like he lets his intrusive thoughts out at dinner, and he's a brute when they fight. And the older brother still is wily and finds a way to win.
Right.
So for him to speak out in defense of Hadrian, it's like we'll see it as chapters come up that, like you said, this is clearly colored by Hadrian's perspective, and it's a beautiful way that Ruocchio does it
Hmm.
in order to give us insight into this is not an unbiased narrative by any stretch of the imagination.
No. Yeah. And I think the last thing here before we outro on this particular chapter is Father asks how Hadrian's Lothrian is, which is
Yeah,
sort of a, if I'm recollecting this perfectly, is it's sort of a reference to like, oh, like this is hearkening just like there's just like not privacy, right? Like you know,
zero.
it's yeah, zero privacy, even where there's not technology, there's a spy somewhere, someone is listening, you can't say your thoughts out loud. So be
As a
very
reminder
careful.
to our last episode, when Gibson tells Hadrian that the Longhopper Consortium is in town because he wasn't like let in on the secret,
Yeah.
he's doing so in this other language called Lothrian. And at this point, Alistair is telling him, "Hey, I heard you.
Yeah.
You know, you have
Yeah.
to say for yourself." And at that point, to Hadrian's credit, he doesn't like shy away from it. And he
Mhm.
says, "Yeah, my Lotharian's really good." And then they talk about Gibson, and his father's like, Gibson's getting old. He forgets like his place. And in Alistair's mind, clearly that there's this strict structure. He disobeyed a direct order from me, and there will be
Yeah.
consequences.
Yeah. And then at the end of this chapter, this is the first time we have like made explicit this threat to not name Hadrian heir.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm remembering correctly, just like Alistair almost like aghast, like you're making assumptions here. Like the
Yeah.
idea that I have even you're assuming that I'm even considering like you need to be careful about what you assume. And it feels like the threat that's been implied throughout the story is like come to life at this point. Like this isn't just Hadrian being insecure or worried about this. It's now like it's like oh actually this is actually floating around. So
This
like
is reality.
yeah, yeah, you're not crazy. It's happening. So cool off, behave better.
Strike two, baby. Strike two. And we finish chapter 5 with that and move on to the final chapter of this episode, chapter 6, Truth Without Beauty.
What a banger.
We, again, beginning of the chapter, put your antennas up because I didn't catch this on the first reading. We have jumped in time to Hadrian and Crispin going to Colosso, which is like the gladiatorial games in this universe on their father's behalf, like in their stead. Normally, the ruler would be up in the box, sort of
Yeah.
in the same sort of way. We'll get parallels to Dune and to Gladiator as we go through the chapter. But like they're clearly meant to be, okay, this is the Marlows representing us. These are our leaders who are becoming, it's like the president or the governor going to a football game, but in this case, people are dying.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that we see is this horrifying creature as like four of these servants are like bringing this eldritch horror dragon with a Venus flytrap mouth
I
out
can't
to,
believe on a second read, I'm like, I did not remember that this was
uh-uh,
present. It's like
yeah,
I was like, oh, like give me the Christopher Ruocchio sci-fi horror book now, please.
yes.
Like it's a terrifying sci-fi monster, and it's just like present in this Colossus scene. It's great.
Yeah, it's basically this dragon-esque winged figure that has a mouth that extends the entirety the length of the
It's like a
dragon's
Venus
neck.
flytrap or something. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
full of teeth. It just brings this feeling, like a feeling you felt when you watched Alien for the first time, but the first time that you like see the xenomorph at the end of the movie, it's spoiler alert for a movie that came out in 1979, but it's this sort of, oh, we as humans realize that we're the apex predator on planet Earth right now, but imagine not being that, being
yeah,
faced and consigned to death, essentially to die because this creature eats you. Oh,
yeah. And all the while, Hadrian is just sort of like sitting here, like trying to just sit here and draw with his charcoal. Is this the first time we've seen Hadrian with charcoal just sitting here doing art stuff? Actually, that's it's interesting. So Hadrian, the melodramatic, is also an artist, not just an
yeah.
interest in languages, but also in art, charcoal drawings. Interestingly enough, if you put on psychology hat for a second, this would imply that Hadrian is high in a personality trait called openness to new experiences, which is associated with artistic and aesthetic endeavors and stuff. People tend to be open-minded to variety of artistic stuff, but also open to ideas and stuff. So he's very, very high in this, both creating and interested in out of the box stuff associated with yeah. So it's really
I didn't
consistent.
catch that, and to your point, right? That's probably where the interest with the Cielcin comes in.
Yep. Hmm.
Whereas we see the opposite sign, right? Like we've got artsy kid drawing in charcoal, and we've got like drooling Crispin just, hey guys, the devils are coming out next. Like imagine, because we get this image of this gladiatorial team, and they even have jerseys
Yep.
with their names on the back of their armor or something like that. Essentially, the team sport of this universe is gladiator matches, and the devils are like the home team that are going to come in and destroy whatever gets put in front of them.
Hmm.
And it's sort of, I think it keys into potentially Ruocchio saying like, hey, this is a tactic that our society and our government uses
Hmm.
to distract us from the stuff that's going on potentially.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder if Ruocchio has that feeling about like the NFL or the UFC or stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
But he's just, meanwhile, Hadrian's just acting totally uninterested
Yeah.
and drawing this lieutenant. Freaking, he is down bad for this girl, Kyra, dude.
Yep.
He is just like drawing her face. He's just not interested in all this different stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how she plays a role in the
Yep.
narrative going forward. But he's clearly said, "Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here because I have to be."
He's like stewing internally this entire time as
Yeah,
he's doing like sort of pontificating about like how gross and immoral this is, all the while like the entire crowd is like just hyping this up and
drinking beer.
drinking beer, hanging out, just enjoying themselves, having a good time, watching the sport, thinking that it's fantastic to watch people get eaten by this horrible, terrifying thing. And there's like this comparison between values of the new world versus home world, like
Old Earth.
us or old
Yeah,
Earth. There's a quote that I put here that I think was interesting. Is it was ironic that the same people who had enacted nuclear war on the home world, who presided over the refugee camps and the rotted ecosphere, had balked in the face of blood sport. Will they call us barbarians, those men of ancient days? Is it interesting? Like this is sort of Ruocchio like yanking us into the story a little bit. He's like,
hmm,
it's like you think this scene is cruel and that yeah we have the capacity to destroy ourselves. It's like it's interesting. We have this sort of um,
it's the
more
dichotomy between like violence at a personal level versus violence at a distant and global level.
yeah. And there's something interesting that about the sort of like moral like social overlay that we have over ourselves right now, and it's almost like Rocky was saying like it's like yes, this world is cruel. But they're a little bit kind of wearing their cruelty on their sleeve in a way that we are not doing in our day. Like it's like
Yeah,
we have the pretense of social morality, all the while there's a lot of really nasty stuff underneath. We have the capacity to end, and in this universe, this resulted in our undoing. Even though
yep,
we pretended like we were good all along the way, we destroyed ourselves. So it's interesting. I
love
really
that.
like that. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
And that he uses a term that's going to come up a ton throughout the series. This word barbarian will be
Yeah.
used and referenced not only in the context of Colosso, but like as Ruocchio's way of indicating to us to think about the morality that you and I are
Yeah.
dealing with on the planet.
Yeah.
We will hear the term barbarian a lot. Just another note on when he's talking about Old Earth too. I just noticed this because I listened to audiobook the first time. This is my first physical read through. Everything that says Earth or Old Earth, like even when Alistair previously in the last chapter says, "I'm gonna live long by Earth" or whatever, it's all capitalized. So
Yeah.
clearly we're getting this little world building thing on the page that's indicating to us that like, just like God or the Lord or Jesus is
Right.
always is capitalized. They have deified old Earth as this god figure in their pantheon, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah. And Crispin's just pumped, man. He's sitting here
Salivating.
and it's like, like Hadrian's having this like intense internal philosophical, like the old people would probably look at us as barbaric, and Crispin's just like, if there was popcorn, he'd be eating it.
Hmm.
He's pumped up.
On
There's
edge of
some,
his seat.
yeah, there's some stuff that's interesting here about that's revealed, I think, for the first time is that there's people have their nostrils slit and crimes tattooed on them. So there's this world building fact about crime that's portrayed in the Colosso that's present about the way that they portray criminals. Their crimes are printed on their bodies for all to see. Their noses are slit, so there's no mistaking somebody who has been committed a crime. So they may have, robbery tatted across their head, or assault, or rape, or whatever it is.
And this is the movement in Colosso too. Like Crispin's getting really excited because the team is coming on, but also
Yep.
we get to this. I think it's a clear reference to Gladiator, where the reenactment happens, where
Mm.
Maximus and they end up winning in Gladiator, but this they do like as part of the Gladiator, as part of Colosso, they will reenact different battles, and unfortunately for the slaves that are on the other side of this battle, they are not long for this world. So these criminals have, like you mentioned, have their noses slit, but clearly in this case they've received more punishment
Yeah.
because not only are they dying in Colosso, but they've had their sex organs cut from them and they've been painted all white. And I think, is this the first time that we find out that the Pale are genderless? Like
Yes.
they have one gender?
Yep. Yes. I forgot the cruelty and graphic nature of the scene actually.
Yeah.
And when I was rereading, it was like, oh yeah, like I forgot how Ruocchio is really interesting as a writer. And he's this Catholic dude who has this worldview that infects his work, but he's just not shy away from like displaying cruelty in his books. And this is like the first instance of like truly graphic violence, I think, when I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like this is like actually really intense. And this is also world building in a sideways way for the Cielcin as well. Like there's not a scene where Hadrian's like, yes, the Cielcin are like there's like this
Mhm.
like this fact is like it's like, oh, I didn't really, this is another one of these drip fed facts about the Cielcin that are nowhere near us but are being portrayed in front of us. Yeah. And then this last note, someone named Volca is mentioned, who apparently also calls those of the Empire barbarians, and he suggests that he may agree. Big Pen and Volca, we can't discuss further at this point, but just note that someone named Volca was mentioned who calls the Empire barbarians and shares maybe some of Hadrian's kind of concerns. They have like connected worldview in some ways.
It's indicated pretty clearly that this person named Volca is directly responsible for him sort of questioning that ideal, right?
Mm. Yep.
Maybe we are barbarians. Like he links it back to what he thought about like old Earth, but this person Volca also clearly had an impact on narrator Hadrian to potentially change his worldview in that direction. These
Yeah.
slaves are brought up. On top of that, there's a really interesting line where Hadrian says, as this slaughter essentially is going on, the ringing of the gong that like starts this reenactment that turns out very, very badly for the slaves, the ringing of that gong echoes within me still, shadowing my own future. This is a pretty heavy foreshadowing moment for Hadrian related to an event with Cielcin. And if you go back to chapter 1, it indicates and tells you there, right? This isn't a spoiler. He's already said it in the narrative.
Mm.
To the poor people of Borosivo, I was a myrmidon called Hade. So we know that based on the events here, this is sort of a dual foreshadowing moment. Clearly, he's going to have some confrontation with the Cielcin in the future, right? He ends the war, so clearly he's come to them face to
Yeah.
face. But on top of that, too, he's looking down on Colosso from the box, and he's already told us, I've been in Colosso as a myrmidon. So it's an interest. We have to keep that in our heads as we go through further through the book and think back to Hadrian's opinion of Colosso from the stands versus from inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also this great line this mention that is written as a resentment sat in me like cancer. It's great. It's sort of just it's almost a visual element to resent. You know, resent has this characteristic of sitting within someone and growing gradually into a deadly, catastrophic thing. It's probably the best
Kills
description.
marriage.
Yeah, it's like yes,
Yeah.
it's probably the best description of resent that I've actually heard someone write. It's like cancer is the perfect analogy for it
Yeah.
because it doesn't start as the thing that kills you. It starts small and you can intervene. The interventions get more drastic as it grows, and if you don't address it, it kills you. And it's perfect. It's like it's very very apt. I just love that. I would be sad not to mention. It's great. I love that. Fantastic writing.
After the devils like destroy the Cielcin, Crispin is, I think he's described by Hadrian as like a puppy that's about to pee himself with how excited he is because it's his first. Imagine like it's your first time that you're going to go be in a sport in front of like a large crowd. And in this case, this kid thinks he's ready. He's young. He's 15 years old. He thinks that the world is his oyster. Meanwhile, his older brother's like, this shit's so stupid. Like, why do I care about this? This is awful. And Crispin is like so excited to actually not only like witness Colosso, but this is the first time he's going to take part in it.
Participate. Yeah.
And then I think at that point, somebody comes up to the box and says,
Crispin, it's time.
He
Yeah.
crushes his like blue Red Bull and is like, let's go. And he goes down there,
He's just pumped.
knocks it over, whatever.
Yeah. And then we have like maybe up to this point, like the best written section of stuff that happens.
Chapter 1. Okay, we got to remember chapter 1 exists.
Chapter 1 is great. This one's pretty wild.
It's very good.
I'm gonna read it because it's worth it. So Hadrian is sitting here, he's looking at his drawing, and we've got once again the dual melodramatic thing plus internal Hadrian philosophy thing going. And we have this final page and a half that is just amazing and philosophical, and it goes like this. I had loved drawing ever since I was a child. As I grew up, however, I realized that there was something singular about the process. A photograph might capture the facts of an object's appearance, colors and details rendered perfectly at higher resolution than any human eye could appreciate. By the same token, a recording or RNA memory injection might convey a subject with perfect clarity. But in the same way that a close reading allows the reader to absorb, to synthesize the truth of what he reads, drawing allows the artist to capture the soul of a thing. The artist sees not not in terms of what is or might be, but in terms of what must be, of what our world must become. This is why a portrait will, to the human observer, always defeat the photograph. It is why we turn to religion even when the science objects, and why the least scholiast might outperform a machine. The photograph captures creation as it is, it captures fact. Facts bore me in my old age. It is the truth that interests me, and the truth is in charcoal, or in the vermilion by whose properties I record this account. Not in data or laser light. Truth lies not in rote, but in small and subtle imperfections, the mistakes that define art and humanity both. Beauty, the poet wrote, is truth. Truth, beauty. He was wrong. They are not the same. There was no beauty in that arena, but there was truth. There, while men shouted and died on the killing floor, executed for the diversion of 70,000 spectators, I saw it, or heard it, rather. Heard it behind the screams and cheers and laughter of the adoring public as Crispin stepped onto the field amidst smoke. as the duelators and servants dragged the bodies of the dead slaves towards the lift. A silence, a profound, echoing quiet. Not a quiet in the ears, but in the mind. The crowd, for it was a singular being, was shouting to drown out the loud silence in their souls. I heard it, but I did not understand what it was, what it meant. Buttoning my jacket, I turned, crossed to the door, and left the box. I needed air. All at once I found I could not stand to watch the tableau no longer. It was not my world, not a thing I wished to inherit along with the rest. The peasants cheered as I left the box, cheered for Crispin. He was welcome to it.
Let's
Unbelievable.
Just sit for a moment.
Just
There's so much there.
It is both, I feel, the moment that gets us the title of this book, is The Empire of Silence.
I didn't even put two and two together with that.
I think this is where the title comes from.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It just, this echoing emptiness and this lack of moral clarity throughout the entire empire is displayed in this analogy of this colosso that Hadrian stares down at and decides he's not going to participate in. It is wonderful. It's philosophical. It has commentary about the narrative, I think.
Commentary on art, right?
Yes. Yes.
And on the value of humanity.
Yes.
And in our day and age where AI generated anything can produce what appears to be on like not a close inspection, soulless, right? It gives a perfect description of this thing that humanity is only capable of doing, while also at the same time indicating to us that our protagonist he's in the box, he lets third strike go by, he's stepping out, he doesn't want to be part of this anymore, and he's indicating to us it's Crispin's to have, I don't care anymore. Where he was, I don't care about winning, I care about Crispin losing. He's so sickened at this point that he's just he can have it. I don't care.
He made a choice here, right? Like, and I think it's worth remembering as we read on. Hadrian made a decision here. Yeah, that this is the world that I will inherit, and I don't want to be a part of it. So, for whatever happens in the future, Hadrian made a choice here. This wasn't an accident. He decided that he didn't want to be a part of it.
Well, it's a beautiful thing too, on that note of him realizing that the person that he is cannot. It's a death almost of the idea of who he thought he could be. Yeah. And him realizing, and even if we go back to earlier in chapter 4 when his mother's like surprised that he's pissed about all this different stuff, this is the death knell of like, I'm not. It is the death of Hadrian thinking that he could be Hadrian the Archon. Yeah. Right? He is realizing that the person he is incapable and incompatible with this life that he thinks that he should have, and he is willingly, to your point, giving it up.
Yeah. And he, as he sees it, I believe he's like, is that there's something true about what he's describing. Like it's like everyone's got this quiet, this emptiness in them, and they're screaming to drown it out, and everyone's celebrating. But the truth of this scene is not in the yelling and the screaming. It's the moral emptiness and the quiet present in everybody. And I'm in service of that, in service of the quiet part, the silence. I'm not participating in the screaming that drowns it out. I'm done. And I'm going to serve truth and what's actually going on underneath and not participating anymore.
The way that you just synthesized that is blowing my mind.
Keep reading the books, please, guys.
Dude.
I know.
I don't think that we can't add any more to that. That's a perfect synthesis of the narrative going forward, too. So let's pack it up there. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Devil's Rest Book Club. And as always forward.
Always down.
And we will see you next time.
Devil's Rest Book Club is Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Today's episode discussed chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. Copyright 2018. Empire of Silence was originally published by Daw Books, an imprint of Astra Publishing House, on July 3rd, 2018. Quality editing and original music by Cameron Elston. Find us on YouTube. Contact us at devilsrestbookclub@gmail.com. Devil's Rest Book Club is a production of Disquiet Pods. This episode, copyright 2025, Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Thanks for joining us, and remember, rage is blindness.